Communism turns 100. The bloodiest political ideology in history is still being preached in universities across the nation by, of course, the, quote, enlightened ones. Dr. Paul Kengor warns, this October-November 2017 marks the 100th anniversary of the launch of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, the bloody communist state that would produce a political ideological killing spree unlike any the world has ever seen. And yet communism continues to find supporters. Here are 3 personal anecdotes. I did a conference this past week on the legacies of communism. One liberal professor complained that no pro-communist speakers were included. I wasn't surprised. Another case. A former student of mine this week told me of his professor at a local college in Pittsburgh who was hailing Karl Marx for his, quote, brilliance. Again, no surprise. One more. A student from the University of Wisconsin called into a talk show I did last week, insisting that capitalism is just as lethal as communism. That all happened just this past week, and it's not unusual in my world. Anecdotes aside, an October 2016 poll by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation generated a stunning finding. Almost 1/3 of millennials believe more people were killed under George W. Bush than under Joseph Stalin. And it isn't only those silly millennials. More than 1 in 4 Americans generally believe Bush was the bigger killer. That same report found that the vast majority of Americans, 75%, underestimate the number of people killed by communist regimes, and a large majority, 68%, believe Hitler killed more people than Stalin. This begs the question, how many people did these ideological gangsters kill? Well, here at the centenary of communism, the number 100 is fitting, given that 100 million is a good stab at the number of people annihilated by the Marxist-Leninist pathology the Bolsheviks sought to spread worldwide. The Harvard University Press classic, The Black Book of Communism, endeavored to tabulate a communist death toll in the 20th century. It came up with the figure of 100 million. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation also arrives at that figure. Cal Berkeley professor Martin Malia aptly noted that the communist record offers the most colossal case of political carnage in history. And even then, this frightening number, 100 million dead, is actually quite conservative. Take the figure relating to the Soviet Union, for instance, where the Black Book recorded merely 20 million dead. Alexander Yakovlev, a high-level Soviet official who became one of Mikhail Gorbachev's chief reformers, and who was given the post-Cold War task of trying to tally the victims, estimates that Stalin alone annihilated 60 to 70 million people. Similar levels of bloodshed was wrought by China's Mao, who was responsible for the deaths of at least 60 million, according to the Black Book, but more like over 70 million according to the latest research. And then there were the killing fields of North Korea, Cambodia, Cuba, Ethiopia, Eastern Europe, Africa, and more. Among these, the North Korean butcher's bill is close to 5 to 6 million. And we can hope and pray that the North Korean nightmare doesn't take on a hideous nuclear dimension under Kim. Who knows how that one could end? Really, the death generated by communist governments in the 20th century is closer to 140 million. By comparison, Hitler's genocide against Jews, gypsies, the mentally disabled, and others he deemed misfits was approximately 10 million. Finally, another chilling figure for comparison. The combined dead from both World Wars I and II, the most destructive conflicts in human history, was approximately 50 to 60 million. One must combine and then double the tolls of the 2 world wars to begin approaching communism's mass slaughter. Ronald Reagan called communism a disease. Actually, it's hard to find a 20th century disease that killed as many people as this ideological pathology. Reagan put it better when he described communism as evil and a form of insanity. And yet, so much of this evil, insanity, isn't known, nor is it being taught, especially in our universities. A frustrated James Kirchick of the liberal Daily Beast recently asked his readers, how many times have you heard some formulation of this viewpoint? Communism is an excellent idea in theory. It just hasn't worked in practice. I wish that was the sort of sentiment I only remembered from college dorm room bull session. He responded, okay, How many more millions of people have to die before we get it right? Good question. And so, as communism marks its centennial, we should remember it for what it did best: death. But why then, in the world, are people preaching this to children? The minds of the youth. Public school teachers are behind a leading far-left militant group that is part of the Antifa network that federal officials say is committing domestic terrorist violence by any means necessary, which has played a key role in the riots in Berkeley, Sacramento, and elsewhere, has dozens of public school teachers among its members, including among its most prominent leaders. The FBI and Department of Homeland Security began paying closer attention to Antifa groups in general after BAM, B-A-M-N, and other extremists started a riot and attacked marchers at a white nationalist rally in Sacramento last July. Politico reported on Friday the Sacramento violence left at least 10 people hospitalized, several of whom had knife wounds. One of BAM's most prominent organizers is Yvette, a Berkeley middle school teacher and pro-violence militant. She currently faces charges of inciting a riot for her role in the Sacramento violence. But the real question is, will she also lose her teaching license? But wait, why is Antifa, anti-fascist, a part of this communist segment or presentation? Antifa is tied directly to the Revolutionary Communist Party. After BAM and other Antifa groups staged violent protests in Berkeley to keep right-wing author Milo Yiannopoulos from speaking, she defended her group's acts of violence. BAM was able to cancel another event, this time an April speech by pro-Trump author Ann Coulter, by promising a repeat performance of the Milo riots. I'd like to take your attention to the picture on the left, Communism for Kids. This is a new children's book by MIT. Communism for Kids intends to brainwash the youth into a murderous political death cult. The overview. Once upon a time, people yearned to be free of the misery of capitalism. How could their dreams come true? This little book proposes a different kind of communism, one that is true to its ideals and free from authoritarianism, offering relief for many who have been numbered by Marxist exegesis and given headaches by the earnest pompousness of socialist politics. It presents political theory in the simple terms of a children's story, accompanied by illustrations of lovable little revolutionaries experiencing their political awakening. It all unfolds like a story, with jealous princesses, fancy swords, displaced peasants, mean bosses, and tired workers, not to mention a Ouija board, a talking chair, and a big pot called the state. Before they knew it, readers are learning about the economic history of feudalism, class struggles and capitalism, different ideas of communism, and more. The author of that study, his name is Dr. Paul Kengor, and he is a professor of political science and executive director of the Center for Vision and Values at Grove City College. Now again, socialism leads to communism. Vladimir Lenin stated the goal of socialism is communism. Don't be fooled. God bless and carry on.